Lately, I've been bombarded with a lot of questions about automotive fuels, lubricants, and other fluids. Owners and technicians have asked about low lead and no lead gasoline, the new engine oil classifications, and various other questions about lubrication recommendations. I think it's time we brought ourselves up to date on the care and feeding of today's cars and trucks. For openers, let's hear what Ray can tell us about low lead or low pollutant fuels.
I'm sure everyone knows that lead compounds are commonly used as anti-knock additives. Small amounts of this lead added to gasoline raises its octane rating and anti-knock performance. In addition, the lead used as a gasoline additive protects the valves and valve seats against wear and burning. This is very important.
Maybe you better explain how that works, Ray.
When leaded fuel is burned in the combustion chamber, the lead additives form new compounds which have good lubricating qualities. These compounds coat the exhaust valves and valve seats with a light film which eliminates excessive wear of these parts. I cut this section out of a cylinder head to demonstrate what can happen to a valve seat when an engine is operated on clear gasoline having no lead or other valve lubricating additives. Notice that the valve seat is very badly worn. This condition is referred to as valve seat recession.
I'd call it worn out. But tell me, aren't some of the low lead or low pollutant gasolines okay for our regular fuel engines?
Yes, Tech, we found that as little as a half gram of lead or 0.07 of a gram of phosphorus per gallon will provide enough exhaust valve lubrication to prevent excessive valve seat wear. However, most low pollutant fuels on the market are only about 91 octane and must not be used in an engine designed to run on premium fuels. Even engines specifically designed for regular grade gas may not do too well on some of the low pollutant fuels.
How come?
91 is about the minimum octane requirement for a regular fuel engine under moderate operating conditions. Under more severe operating conditions, calling for a lot of full throttle performance, 91 octane won't be high enough to prevent objectionable spark knock. That's the gasoline story as I see it today, Tech. But I'm sure that we'll see a lot of changes in both engine design and fuels in the next few years. Most people don't realize how much the all-out effort to minimize vehicle emissions is affecting engine design, fuel characteristics, and lubrication requirements. The entire picture is in a constant and rapid state of change. It's most important for owners and mechanics to understand how these changes affect the care and feeding of the cars they drive or service, as the case may be. Last year's cars aren't the same as this year's models, and in many cases, fuel and lubricant requirements aren't the same either. Any owner who spends several $1,000s for a new car but doesn't take the time to read the maintenance section of his operator's manual could be asking for trouble. As a matter of fact, every service technician should make sure he knows what the current operator's manual says about periodic service. In addition, service technicians should follow the recommendations in the current service manuals when they're working on a 71 model. And the way things are changing, it's more important than ever that they read every service bulletin that comes in.
Speaking of changes, what's the story on engine oil and oil change intervals?
Before getting into specifics, let's take a few minutes to review the things a good engine oil must do. The first job is the obvious one. Engine oil must lubricate all the moving parts and minimize wear by preventing metal-to-metal contact. The ability of the engine oil to cool engine parts is very important. In order to do this, the oil must be able to withstand extremely high engine temperatures. Engine oil must provide a good seal between piston rings and cylinder walls. A good oil seal helps maintain good compression and prevents excessive blow-by. One of oil's most important jobs is to protect the engine against corrosive acids, moisture, and other contaminants. These undesirables are all normal byproducts of combustion. Last but not least, oil must keep the engine parts and oil passages clean. It must prevent the accumulation of deposits that would affect engine operation and promote engine wear. The engine oil story is actually the story of the amount and the kind of additives necessary to produce a high-quality product that will protect the engine against all these things. The oil change interval depends on how fast these additives are depleted or destroyed. Some parts, like cam lobes, tappets, and piston rings, present a real lubrication problem. Because of the constant high-speed rubbing action between these parts, they will scuff and wear rapidly unless the oil contains a very special chemical additive which forms a protective coating on the moving parts. The anti-scuff additives in a high-quality oil actually promote the polishing of the moving parts. They help polish the cams, piston rings, and cylinder walls. This polishing and seating action aids engine break-in, and the additives protect these parts against scuffing after break-in. Engine heat gradually destroys the anti-scuff additives. Once they're used up, the oil can no longer prevent scoring and excessive wear. The anti-scuff additives are good for about 4,000 miles of highway driving. Since engine heat is the prime enemy of the anti-scuff additives, extreme operating conditions which produce excessive engine heat may further reduce the life of these additives and necessitate oil changes at shorter mileage intervals.
Suppose you catch your breath while I talk about acid in the oil. Corrosive acids are the most common cause of abnormal engine wear. Partially burned fuel and moisture are the main acid-forming ingredients. When the acid-forming byproducts of normal combustion combine with moisture, rusting and corrosion of engine parts is really speeded up. Cylinder bores, piston rings, hydraulic tappets, timing chains, rocker arms, and valve springs are all fair game for corrosive acids. A reddish-brown coating on these parts is a sign of neglected oil change and corrosive acid damage. High-quality oils usually contain two types of corrosion inhibitors. One type actually retards the formation of acids by attacking the acid-forming ingredients. The other type inhibitor neutralizes any acid that is formed. This is a mighty big order when you stop to think that about 1 gallon of water plus acid-forming ingredients are produced by each gallon of gasoline burned. But I think Ray is ready to take over again.
Thanks, Tech. Driving conditions affect the useful life of the corrosion inhibitors more than the mileage driven. When the engine is cold, relatively large amounts of acid are formed. That's why cold weather and short trips consume the corrosion inhibitors quite rapidly. To keep the acid under control, a high-quality oil with plenty of acid inhibitor must be used, and under normal driving conditions, the oil must be changed every 3 months. Under cold engine, short trip driving conditions, oil should be changed more often. The word sludge isn't exactly a scientific chemical term, but it certainly describes the thick, dirty condition found in an engine when oil changes have been neglected. Partially burned gasoline, combustion soot, and moisture are the principal sludge ingredients. Any engine or driving condition that reduces combustion efficiency increases sludge formation. Since sludge restricts oil flow, the harmful effects of sludge are fairly obvious. In addition, varnish may be formed in an engine by cooking the sludge ingredients at high engine temperature. High-quality oils and fuels which minimize varnish formation are particularly important in today's engines. We know that all fuels contain ingredients that can produce varnish under some operating conditions. In addition, small amounts of varnish may be formed by heating engine oil until it starts to oxidize and break down. Varnish does most of its dirty work by causing moving parts to stick or bind. For example, badly varnished piston rings stick in the ring grooves. This results in excessive oil consumption and blow-by. Varnish on hydraulic tappet plungers causes serious valve lifter troubles. Since oxides formed by heating oil or burning gasoline produce sludge and varnish, oils must have suitable oxidation inhibitors. These inhibitors react chemically with the sludge and varnish, forming ingredients to form new compounds which are relatively harmless. This retards the formation of sludge and varnish. Even under ideal driving conditions, Some of the oxidation inhibitor is used up in combating the formation of sludge and varnish. A cold engine, or one that isn't properly tuned, greatly accelerates the rate at which the oxidation inhibitors are used up. The only effective way to fight sludge and varnish formation is to use a high-quality oil containing adequate oxidation inhibitors and change oil before these additives are depleted.
And since this side of the record is depleted, will someone change it so we can hear what's on the other side?
Even under ideal driving conditions, small amounts of contamination manage to get into the oil. Traces of non-abrasive contaminants aren't particularly harmful. If they're held in suspension and circulated, the oil filter soon traps and holds the solids. Detergent and dispersant additives hold the contaminants in suspension and prevent them from depositing out in critical areas. Without these additives, solids would plug small oil passages and in extreme cases might result in partial plugging of the oil intake screen. The detergent and dispersant additives help keep the engine clean, but they're gradually used up, in much the same way that dirty pots and pans use up the detergents in a pan of dishwater. Heat and constant agitation of the engine oil tends to produce air bubbles and foam. Since it takes a solid stream of oil to maintain oil pressure, foaming could be a serious problem. High-quality oils contain anti-foam additives which minimize the formation of air bubbles and prevent the formation of foam.
The importance of engine oils having the right kind and right amount of additives is pretty obvious. But tell me, how do you choose the right oil?
It may be true that you can't judge a book by its cover. However, you can judge an oil by what it says on the container. Actually, the petroleum industry has recently revised its system of oil classification, so you better know about the old and the new system. Under the old engine oil classification system that's being phased out, only MS oil should be used in our cars and trucks. Under the new system, oils with an SD classification are recommended. So owners should stick to oils that are labeled MS or SD. However, it looks like we may soon have another recommended classification, SE. If and when it is introduced, all our dealers will get a service bulletin telling them all about it and under what conditions it should be used.
Speaking of bulletins, what's the inside story on this sperm oil additive recommended in a service bulletin last summer?
Sperm oil provides extra protection against cylinder wall, piston ring, and piston pin scuffing. This is a must for high-performance engines and desirable in other engines. This oil actually comes from a cavity in the head of the sperm whale. Sperm oil has great film strength and unusual ability to cling to metal surfaces. The factory oil fill for all high-performance engines consists of a pint of sperm oil additive and a high-quality MS or SD engine oil.
As a matter of fact, the factory fill on all cars and trucks is high-quality MS or SD.
Right, Tech. Now, any high-performance engine that's operated under maximum performance conditions needs heavier than normal lubricating oil. For best protection of the engine, the highest viscosity oil that will permit satisfactory cold starting should be used, and a pint of sperm oil should be added at every oil change.
Haven't there been some other changes in the oil viscosity recommendations in the past year or two?
Yes, Tech, and we'll probably see more changes in the future as a result of engine design improvements we're working on to further reduce exhaust emissions. Generally speaking, higher viscosity oil is desirable for extra hot engine protection. On the other hand, we need reasonably low viscosity oils for easy cold weather starting. As a result of these requirements, we're working to develop multi-viscosity oils having the widest possible viscosity range. For example, the 10W40 and the 20W50 oils are relatively recent additions to the multi-viscosity oils readily available at your friendly service station. What's more, I'll stick my neck out and predict that we'll probably see even wider viscosity ranges available in the foreseeable future. Because of developments like this, it's important for owners and service technicians to recognize that the oil and fuel picture is changing, and they must know what the present recommendations are.
The detailed oil classification, oil viscosity, and the oil change recommendations are spelled out in the operator's manual and the service manual, so there's no reason to repeat that information here. However, suppose you summarize the guidelines for oil viscosity and oil change intervals.
Single viscosity oils of the correct weight are satisfactory for areas where temperature ranges are fairly constant and seasonal changes are not very great. Where seasonal temperature changes are both rapid and severe, the owner may get caught between oil changes with an oil that's too heavy for starting or too light for good lubrication. Multi-viscosity oils were developed for the convenience of owners living in areas experiencing significant seasonal temperature changes. For example, 10W30 or 10W40 will provide good year-round hot engine protection and easy cranking in many parts of the country. Next, let's consider oil change recommendations. Oils must be changed before the additives are used up and before the oil becomes excessively contaminated. Let's review briefly what happens to the additives. Anti-scuff additives are gradually used up in lubricating hot engine surfaces. Corrosion inhibitors neutralize acids formed in the engine and are consumed in the process. Oxidation inhibitors are used up when they react chemically with combustion ingredients to retard or prevent the formation of sludge and varnish. Oil contaminants and deposits gradually consume the detergents and dispersants. So, how often should the oil be changed? This depends on temperature, type of operation or driving conditions, and the engine condition or how well it is tuned. The favorable engine temperature conditions and the low rate of contamination during highway driving in a properly tuned car permits the owner to drive 4,000 miles between oil changes. The short trip driver needs to change oil more frequently. Since driving conditions affect the life of the oil additives, it's not possible to determine the proper oil change interval solely on a fixed mileage basis. An oil change interval based on time adjusts for the type of driving as well as the mileage. For most types of operation, the oil should be changed every 3 months. Frequent driving on dusty roads or unusual short trip driving, particularly in cold weather, calls for more frequent oil changes. Our full flow oil filters remove solids from the oil before it is circulated through the engine. A relief valve is incorporated in the system which permits unfiltered oil to bypass the filter if it should become clogged. The filter must be changed every other oil change to effectively protect the engine against damage from abrasive solids. With this filter change policy, conditions calling for frequent oil changes ensure more frequent filter changes. Oil filters do vary greatly in their ability to remove fine particles from the oil and in their capacity to trap and hold solids without becoming clogged. Filters available from Chrysler parts meet all of the standards necessary to protect our engines. Incidentally, a dirty or damaged carburetor air filter or a neglected crankcase ventilation system will contribute to oil contamination. Under normal operating conditions, the air filter and the crankcase vent system should be serviced every 6 months. If the air cleaner and crankcase vent valve require more frequent service, the vehicle is probably being operated under conditions that call for more frequent engine oil and filter changes.
About all we've talked about is fuel and engine oil service. How about transmission, rear axle, steering, and brake system fluids and lubricants?
There haven't been very many recent changes in servicing those units, Tech. Only automatic transmission fluid labeled Dexron should be used in our torque flight transmissions. Dexron is also recommended for our manual transmissions. The old Type A fluid has not been recommended for several years now and should not be used. Power steering fluid of the type available from Chrysler parts is the only one I know of that's completely satisfactory for our power steering system. Automatic transmission fluid should not be used because it will gradually attack and shorten the life of the power steering hoses. Chrysler Hypoid Lube is recommended for both conventional and sure grip differentials. This lubricant is also recommended for our manual steering gear. Brake fluid advancements have kept pace with the demands placed on the brake system by expressway driving and the heat generated in stopping a heavy car that is driven at higher speeds. There are two important precautions with respect to brake fluid and brake service. First, use only approved type brake fluid. Unfortunately, inferior fluids do find their way to market, and they should be avoided. Second, all brake fluids will absorb water from the air, and even the best fluids with high initial boiling point are very adversely affected by relatively small amounts of water. Keep brake fluid in sealed containers so it will remain moisture-free. Never use a container that has been used for oil. And make sure the master cylinder diaphragm seal is in good condition so that the system is airtight.
Thank you, Ray. You've answered the most important questions I've been getting on fuels, lubricants, and fluids. As a matter of convenience, we'll include a service summary at the end of the film and of this month's reference book. Be sure and keep your service manuals handy, and to keep up with running changes, read your service bulletins. These publications and your reference book will help you all do a better job of keeping your customers happy.